Our desire to connect with others is ingrained in our very being. From the moment we're born, we seek the touch and the belonging of our maternal bond. And studies show that this need for connection and belonging only grows stronger as we navigate that separation from our parents during our teenage years, even. And that's why it's important for us to feel like we fit in, that we belong somewhere. Our ancestors knew that survival was more likely when they were part of a tribe than if they existed alone or if they were solitary. So we are truly wired for connection, and finding out where we came from, where our roots originated, that's become a renewed priority for many. Now, DNA testing has opened up new possibilities to explore and connect with our ancestors like never before. And while anonymity was once desired, many doors that were thought to be closed forever are now being opened. And for some, it's a chance to connect with long lost relatives or find a path to their roots. But for others, it's a curse of secrets being revealed. Today, we're talking about the science behind this need to connect and the ways to explore and preserve information about your ancestry. So where do you start gathering information? And how can we keep the stories alive? And just because I like to spice things up a little, I have some crazy or maybe not so crazy ideas on how we can connect with those who are no longer walking on this earth. Well, hello. You are listening to the No Brainers Empowering Possibilities Show. These are dialogues of encouragement with fresh perspective, invitations to ahas, a little bit of science, and a dash of behavioral psychology, and skills and tools that you can use right now. So if leveling up is on your radar, my friend, you are at the right show. I'm your host, Roseanne Marsh. I'm the author of the teen and the parent empowerment curriculum called Level Up. And you are listening to episode number 69, The Pull to Find Our Ancestry. Thousands of years ago, traditions and honors of ancestry was passed on through the stories that they would tell. The stories that were either kept in remembrance or memorized to pass on from one generation to the next. They were either written in metal plates, on papyri, or it was just something that was kept here and related. So the history of people was important, not only to be able to pass on the rituals and the beliefs, but also to document the civilization and what they had learned. It was proof of existence. And with the resurgence of finding our roots, there are television series that bring to life the journeys of celebrities and other known well people as they search the world over for their stories and the information about the ancestors. There's one show I love. It's called Who Do You Think You Are? And there's many other fun TV series that you can watch, such as Ancestors or In the Attic or Genealogy Roadshow. And that's kind of like Antiques Roadshow, but has kind of a little bit of a history while they're trying to find their relatives. And a really fun one that I watched was Relative Race. And that's where there's 4 teams that set up similar to like the Amazing Race style, where they're following clues and they're trying to compete to get to different areas in different towns so that they can meet up with unknown relatives that they didn't even know exist, but could be traced now thanks to DNA testing. And there's one called Long Lost Family, where separated families are reunited, and you get to see these touching stories where they're joined with those that they have been so desperately seeking. It's not just the TV series, the film industry also portrays the importance of showing us traditions and history played out through musicals and comedies and tragedies. But they tell the stories of cultures and traditions and successes and even difficulties. Think about the movies that have the strong familial message. There's like the Godfather trilogy, The Lion King, Fiddler on the Roof, Roots, Encanto. I mean, there's so many movies. And in those movies, we learn about their culture, the diversity, the things they hold true to them. I recently rewatched the live version of Mulan and her struggle of being caught between honor and loyalty and the roles of women. And yet that would deny the gift that she had been given. A similar storyline plays out in Moana and how events on their island kept them from going beyond very deep into the ocean, where in fact she felt pulled to go. And as the storyline plays out, we learn of the mindset, the culture, the generational experience, all passed down from centuries through oral traditions by the people of the South Pacific Ocean. But what I find fascinating about history is when we understand where they live, what's going on in their culture, what are their traditions and the expectations of that day, and then we learn a little bit about why they lived the way they lived. Now think about Star Wars series. Didn't we understand more about the characters when we saw the prequel to the prequel to the prequel? But isn't it about the stories? Have you ever received a birthday gift? You get like this print out, and it's the year that you were born, and it tells everything that was happening in the world at that time. So like how much a home costs, the average income, the price of a loaf of bread, the popular songs, the movies there, who are the sporting teams were. And it gives some interesting aspects of that time. But what are the personal stories of that time? For instance, my parents were born in the Depression, 1929 through 1939. And the stories my mom told me of not having a bathroom, but an outhouse that was 40 feet away from home that they'd have to run to, and eating milk toast at night. Now, milk toast, that's bread with warm milk on it. And if you were lucky, then it had some sugar and cinnamon on it. But that's all they could afford to eat at night. And with no bathroom, they all had to bathe in the kitchen in this huge, large metal tub. So they'd heat the water on the stove and they'd like fence it off with some towels. And then the oldest would go first, then the next, then the next, then the next. And it's funny, they say, you know what? We never remember our parents bathing at all. I wonder when they did that. Obviously, when the kids went to sleep. But it's the stories. And while today we have films that showcase different cultures and their values, like Moana and Mulan, we can also explore our own history by understanding our cultures, where we came from, our traditions, the expectations, and the reasons why our ancestors lived the way they lived. Documenting history, rituals, and successes is important for preserving our roots. A few years ago, I had this overwhelming urge to capture my dad's life story on camera. Now, he was a photographer, so all our life, we'd always had movies taken or photos taken. And I wanted to make sure that I got him on camera. I had all these deep philosophical questions that I wanted my dad to answer about his life. But when I turned on the camera, I realized he wanted to tell his version of his life story in his own words and answer his own questions. What a treat I was in for as we met 5 times for several hours of recording at a time. And I didn't do that with my mother before she passed away. She passed away young at age 72, and wish I had. So when I have friends tell me that their parents are ailing or their grandparents are ailing, one of the first things I admonish them is, oh my gosh, get your cell phone, and every time you're over there, capture their stories, capture information about their life. Take advantage of the fact that they're here and now and can still remember to pass on to you those things that may not be recorded. Now, there's no wrong or right way to record or videotape records, but with our cell phones, it makes it easier than ever. And then transfer that information to an SSD card, something where you could preserve it. Now, what I did with my dad was I actually had a green screen and I set that up, and I videotaped an interview with him in front of that green screen, because my intention was that he had all these photographs of his life that we would put them behind him when the final cut was made. So he'd talk for about an hour and a half, then we'd take a break, and then we'd come back for another hour and a half. He had these little note cards that he would come prepared with what he wanted to cover during that interview time that we had together. And then he'd go home and find the pictures that associated with what he had to say. Now, because this was done many years ago, I put them together on DVDs, and then I gifted this to all my family for Christmas and to all the nieces and nephews. And I can't tell you how precious it was to hear him talk about not even realizing that his own mother was pregnant, and all of a sudden she shows up with this little sister for him and wondering where she came from. Or the emotional time when being deployed to Korea for over a year, and he was trying to get back home after being released from military duty. And they came into his office and gave him 10 minutes to get to the airport, to catch a plane, to get to the naval base, so he could spend the next 11 days on a naval ship to come back to the United States. Now, he'd left my mom, but his wife and my older brother, who was only 2 months old when the last time he saw him, at home. And there was no phone communication. There was only writing letters back and forth. And to watch him talk about how when that naval ship passed under the Golden Gate Bridge and he knew he was back in American soil, he said, "You can't imagine how I felt knowing that within 20 minutes I was going to be able to telephone and talk to my wife for the first time in a year." My dad rarely got emotional, but to see him and capture on camera that time when he got emotional was priceless. One of the most precious things that we can give someone else is our time, right? And when we stop and listen to what those stories are, on what their life was like, I had a totally new appreciation for my father. And then I was able to ask some really tough questions along with the interviewing, and even off camera. I remembered when I was young, going to the hospital to visit him because he'd been hospitalized for bleeding ulcers. And I said, "Dad, why do you really think you had bleeding ulcers?" And he said, "I had 3 jobs. I had a young little family. Life was really stressful." It's about the stories, right? It's about what we learn from those stories and being able to keep those stories alive. So don't miss out on the opportunity with those that are still living to take advantage of those one-on-one times to hear the life they led to become the people they became. Now, you may be one of those that have done a lot of genealogy or have some aunt or uncle or someone who's done a lot of work for your genealogy. But if you're just starting out, you may think, "Oh my gosh, where do I even start?" Start with what you know. Begin by gathering the information on you and your family, your immediate family. Get dates, get birth dates, get death dates, get christening dates, get relatives' names, everything that can remember. I have a big, beautiful family Bible that I had to kind of fight to get because the family wanted to put it in a museum. But it's so precious to me because it has all the lists of family members from one side and their marriage dates and important dates to them. And just to know that they use this Bible, to me, is a pretty amazing piece of my heritage. So talk to family members, reach out to older relatives such as grandparents, aunts, and uncles who might have additional information about your ancestors. Ask them about memories, stories, and any documents or photographs that they might have. Then you can also go online and do online research. There are some pretty remarkable programs online. Now, some of them you do pay for. There's Ancestry.com, that's amazing, MyHeritage, Find My Past. And these platforms really offer a lot of extensive database and historical records and family trees. And then on the other end, there are some free things like Family Search, which is a totally free. It is owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it offers a vast collection of genealogical records. Another free option is WikiTree, and that's a collaborative platform where people merge things. And there's also like Heritage Quest and Fold3. You can also visit local archives and libraries to see if it holds any important information or documents that you need. You could consider doing some DNA testing, and that can help connect you with distant relatives and learn more about your family's ethnic background. DNA testing is not foolproof, But the more people who contribute to the DNA testing, the more accurate it becomes. Now, if you have the resources, you can always hire someone to do the research for you. And here's what's really fun. There are companies out there who will actually plan a trip for you or your family to go wherever your ancestry is from. The old homestead homes, get you into some of the archive areas, let you see the original records, do some research for you before. Does that not sound amazing? I have friends that have taken their entire family to a European location where they actually saw where their great-great-grandfather was born and the great-great-grandmother and where they met, and was able to go into the churches and find some of the original records and photograph the documentation. Piecing together some of our ancestry may not be the fastest thing. When we have a passion to find our ancestry, it's funny how doors open for us. Now, I promised a little surprise about how we can possibly connect with ancestors who have passed from this realm. It comes from a personal experience I had. When my mother was dying of cancer in the hospital, she said to me many, many times, promise me that you will have a picture of me in your home. And I was, of course, Mom, I will. But she was quite insistent. I kept saying, yes, Mom, of course. I promise you, I will have a picture of you in my home at all times. And then her home went over this major reconstruction, and we had to move out into a temporary place. And I didn't have any pictures out. And then as we were moving back into our remodeled home, underneath the stairwell in an area that had not been remodeled during the reconstruction, there was a bunch of rubble. And there was a plastic bag, Ziploc bag, and in it was a picture of my mom. There was no frame. So I asked the construction workers, does anyone know where this came from or how it even got there? And no one knew how it had appeared underneath the stairs. And I was grateful, though. I was like, oh my gosh, Mom, here's your picture. Where have you been? Now, about that time, a show came out celebrating the tradition of Dia de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead, where they celebrate and remember the family members that have passed on. And you may know the movie as Coco. And it's part of a celebration where they set up water and candles and flowers and the picture of the dearly departed and their favorite meal. And the hope is to guide and feed the loved ones' souls as they venture in their journey on the other side. But what was so important is that there needed to be a picture of that person. Now, I'd asked some of my beautiful Latino friends, is that true that there has to be a picture in the food? And they go, oh, yes, we celebrate that every single year. Now, if you haven't seen the show, you need to see it. But the crux of the whole movie was about a photo that had a head ripped off. And it was the great-great-grandfather of Miguel. And the story goes that the great-great-grandfather had left his family to go off and study music and never came back. So music was banished from the family. But Miguel wanted so desperately to be a musician. I won't tell you any more than that. But it was crazy when I'm watching that show and they're saying how important it is to have a photo of your ancestors so that they can come through. I just sat there and went, my mother was pretty insistent that I have a photograph of her. Now I've got photos everywhere. Now, can I tell you, I believe the connection we have with those who have passed on from this reality is really much stronger when we have those photographs there. And whether or not that's a conduit for them to be able to come through easier, even though I believe that on their birthdays, it's a really special day for them, and they can possibly visit Earth a little easier. What I do know is the science of it. And the science is that when we see their photo, in our neural system is imprinted all of the memories that we have of them. And they live on in us when we have that visual and emotional representation of those we love that have passed on. And when it's right there in front of us, reminding us all the time. So there's science. And then there's also the, I wonder if there's more. So I wonder what you've experienced with that. Put it in the comments. So you want some really thought-provoking questions that you can ask those that are still alive around you and you want to get some great information? Well, I'm putting that in the comments below. So there's 10 questions that can help you fill some pretty amazing information. Feel free to use those. And if you've got any other questions that you think opened up the floodgate of information, share with all of us. Now, look, there's a lot of really good reasons why people feel compelled to find their ancestry. One is understanding our cultural heritage, our traditions, and our values. It gives us that sense of an identity, of belonging. Remember, we're wired for connection. And it allows us to connect with the stories, the experiences, the struggles of those who came before us, and really gives us a deeper understanding of our roots. By researching and documenting our family history, we can preserve and pass down our heritage to future generations, ensuring that our families' stories are not forgotten. It's the stories. And when we do genealogical research, often we uncover some pretty fascinating and sometimes unexpected stories about our ancestors, such as their achievements, their hardship, or even sometimes some famous or not so famous connections. And there's those that say, well, I want some insights into inherited health conditions. I want to know about the genetic risks. But if that's one of your reasons, I want you to go back to episode 68, because we talked a little bit more there about how you have more control over your DNA than you think you do. This is about not allowing our ancestors to be forgotten. It's about remembering and keeping those stories alive. But hey, while we're there recording everyone else's stories, we're not off the hook. We need to do a better job of recording our own history so that we're not leaving it to somebody else to ask us questions. Now, I'm calling myself on the carpet here because my parents did a great job of writing their histories and even putting pictures with it. But I've got a lot of my own adult life that, although I have journals now over the past 8 years, there's a lot of time frame that I don't think anyone would find my history and even know what I have been up to. So tune in next week for a compelling list of questions that's going to turn your personal journey into an unforgettable story. Your story. So until next week, tally ho. Let's go find those ancestors.